Right, I've finished all the body repairs and now I'm preparing it for paint. Being a predominantly black vehicle, the surface underneath has to be blemish free and it has to be flat. Now, when you sand cars with small sanding blocks, you end up with a surface which appears flat, but when you look across it, you can end up being rather wavy, particularly when you're using dark colours. You can see the undulations in the paint, even though it is flat to the touch. Now, blocks that size really aren't big enough for flatting large surfaces. Now I've got this block here, which is certainly much longer, not much wider, which provides a better surface for flatting. I've also got another block which is about that long, which I'll be using later to cover the really large areas where you need to have a flat surface. On these curved areas, blocks like this are helpful. But what I've found is that, you can buy sort of rubber compound blocks which will mould to the surface. Now, what I've been using, very simple, it's just a flexible ruler, flat on one side, a little bit domed on the other. And I use that. What it does, it moulds to the curvature of the body. So when I'm sanding areas like this, I use this, and I'll rub it backwards and forwards and in different angles and different ways, but at all times trying to keep as much of that in contact with the surface as possible. So what it's doing, it's actually flattening an area, well, the length of the sanding block that I've got here. So it's flattening a large area of the car and also sticking to the curves. Now I've put plastic filler on this. Reason being is, even though this body is not damaged in any way, it is still not completely flat. And the only way to get it flat is to apply a thin film of filler and then use these tools to block it off. And that's what I'm currently doing. It's not a hard process, it's a very dirty process. And the new fillers are quite soft and easy to rub off. Flatten out. And whilst you put filler on there, a lot of it ends up on the floor and all over you. Now I normally have a fan running. I've turned it off because of the video. I keep the air moving out of the garage, so I try to keep as much dust away from there as possible. But having said that, I'm still covered in dust. So I'll be applying filler over all areas of the car. This area here is almost finished to the extent that I can apply some undercoats and continue with the flatting process. As I say, they look completely flat when you rub your hand over them. And when you put fillers in there, you start to realise there are high points and there are low points, and you've actually got to end up with a surface that is very flat. Otherwise you'll see it through the paint. This will take a long time, but that's what the painting process involves. A lot of effort in the preparation, particularly if you want a good finish. Here's another sanding block I've made up out of a piece of wood, thin piece of wood. Now I'm using that to do some of these large areas, and across there I've been using it too. It's thin enough to bend, but it's providing a very long flat surface to achieve what I'm trying to achieve. So yes, you can buy the blocks, you can make up things that you can use. I guess it depends on the shape of the car as to what you need. This car's got a lot of curves. It does have some flat surfaces. So, I'll use this on the side to flat all of that area at the one time when I'm sanding it. And I'll alternate too. So I might use the big long one, and then I'll use the soft one to mould more into the surface. I try and sand in a random fashion. If you keep sanding the same way, you can end up with problems. So, I'll sand this way, that way, always to achieve a random surface, and that will then cut down any regular pattern you've created by sanding in one direction. So I'll continue. I'll update with a few videos as I go through, but I'm just trying to get the back end of the car smoothed off first, and then I'll probably put a bit of undercoat on that to seal it up and then move further down the car. But yeah, long dirty process, but certainly necessary if you want to achieve a good looking finish at the end. Now if I used a light colour, maybe a white, you wouldn't see the imperfections as much, unless of course you look for them, and unfortunately when you do the work yourself, you tend to look at what you've done and criticise, and you can see all the imperfections in the world that others can't see. Anyway, I'll continue on. I've now finished filling the body. A light skim of plastic filler over pretty much the entire body. I've levelled it as best I can at this stage with my large sanding blocks. It's probably still not flat, but it's certainly a lot better than it was. And what looks flat ends up not being very flat. As you can see, there's some parts where there is actually no filler, and other parts where there's just small bits, and other parts here where there's a lot more. Of course there's a seam in there, so that's probably the reason for that. Still not flat. I'll apply a coat of, or a couple of coats of high build primer over that, and then I'll put a guide coat on and rub it back to see where the imperfections are, and then I'll be using a very large sanding block to try and flatten it off. And before doing that, I've just addressed the issue with the gutters, and the issue there is being able to seal inside the gutters against the body. It's a good trap for water. This is obviously why these have rusted out in the past. So I've actually put one fairly thick coat of seam sealer in there. Now I managed to find some brushable seam sealer. I was wondering how I was actually going to get it in there. It's fairly thick. Now I've used a couple of different brushes to really layer it up on the brush, and then put the brush in there and twist the brush around. Now I've just done both gutters. I'll do it at least once more to make sure I've got a good seal in there. So I'm hoping that that's sealed in between the gutter and the body to stop any water from going in. So I'll do that again just to make sure before I'll put any primer on. Anyway, the next shot you'll see, this will be in primer, ready to start finishing it for paint. Another major milestone, the first bit of undercoat is now on the body. I finished doing the major flattening with body filler as best you could without a primer on it. I've now got a primer, followed by a light coating of spray putty. What I've then done is gone over it with a spotlight, and just a handheld spotlight, this one here, and by putting the light at an angle you can see where there are any little depressions in the filler. Now sometimes it's hard to see them unless you've got the light on an angle. When you have that light on an angle, it shows up the depressions. So then I've been over the whole body with stop putty. There's little bits of it here, bits here and there, and that's it's surprising how much you find in terms of little depressions. Now you could try and fill that with primer, but it'll take an awful long time. You'd be spraying it and rubbing it back and spraying it and rubbing it back, just trying to fill a little hole. It's a lot easier with stop putty. So stop putty is now on. What I'll now do is to spray a guide coat over the top. And you can see the undercoat does come through some of the spray putty. I've concentrated spray putty on areas where I've been filling the body, and a bit light on other areas. So I'll put a guide coat over the top of this. Just have some old green paint which I'll just lightly spray over the top, and then I'll start the flatting process of the body in earnest with large boards and so on to make sure the whole surface is flat. Now once you've got the primer on, you can then see, and with the guide coat you can see any further highs and lows that just need to be addressed. So that's the next step. This is the first time I've used the 400mm block. Not bad to use. It's actually easy to handle. The interesting thing about it is it does pick up highs and lows very well on a large surface like this. You can see bits of going back to steel, other bits you can see bits of filler, here you can see bits of undercoat, and other bits, probably a little bit around here, you can see bits of the other filler, the yellow and green guide coat I put on there. So that's a slightly low point. I can barely feel that, but it's enough there to provide a depression. So it's flattening the surface quite well. I'm only using at this stage 120 in it, so it's a lot easier to see where I've got to provide more, probably high build filler. I don't think I need any more major filling. Yeah, with the slight depressions there, maybe I should just get under there, and if there's access, just to tap the metal up a little bit. But it's coming up, quite nicely. Another little yellow spot here where it's a bit low. I might be able to get under that and tap that up too. So it's coming out quite nice. Dirty process. So I'll do this all over, identify further spots I need to concentrate on with some high build filler, and then I'll go over it again with 120, and then gradually reduce the grit. Probably the final grit I'll use on this is 240. By then I should have this really flat enough for what I want. And as I said before, seeing this has been done in black, it needs to be flattened fairly well, otherwise you are going to see undulations. Now whether I get all of the undulations out depends on how much time I want to spend. Now, maybe I won't, but certainly I'll get the majority out with this process. The body preparation is now complete. I've just finished rubbing it back with 400 dry. There don't appear to be any major problems with the paint surface. I'm sure there are imperfections, but at this stage I'm quite happy to proceed to putting some colour on the vehicle. But before I do that, I've got another coating of primer to put on. I'll put maybe 2 to 3 coats of primer on it. Then I'll be rubbing back with 600 wet, and following that I'll be doing the colour. Now this stage, black on top, the bottom components white. I was originally thinking of Old English white. Also toyed with putting silver, but I think now I'll go with the Old English white below that line there. In the engine bay here, I guess I could put white in there, but I don't like the idea of white in the engine bay. So this will be sprayed silver enamel. So that's actually ready to go now. It doesn't have to be as fine a finish in the engine bay. So it's now complete, and I'll move on to the next stages.